They seem to think that LinkedIn is just about visibility or posting more, and they think it's all about getting likes or going viral. But what really drives results is actually much more practical, and it's about conversations first and conversations that are intentional. And more often than not, that always begins in the DMs, the direct messaging. It's all about creating conversations that turn into relationships. And what we see is that those relationships can turn into ongoing business. I'm Sylvie Garibaldi, founder and CEO of a well-established marketing training and done-for-you services company, tailored specifically for the modern legal and financial professional worldwide. While it's taken some trial and error to figure out which methods get the best results for professionals who are looking to grow their practices, fast forward to today, my team and I have nailed down and perfected a process that has helped so many of our clients consistently achieve outstanding results and create a legacy for their practices. I created the Serve First, Sell Later marketing podcast to give you simple, actionable, non-salesy, and results-driven marketing to grow your legal or financial practice like so many of our clients have. If you're a lawyer, mediator, financial, or divorce professional who is looking to become highly visible and wants to create a practice that makes an impact, then you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode 121 of the Serve First, Sell Later marketing podcast. I'm your host, Sylvie Garibaldi. So over the past 6 months, one of our clients, a divorce mediator, booked approximately 80 meetings with referral partners through LinkedIn, built over 500 highly targeted LinkedIn connections, and consistently averaged about 3 new conversations every single week. But here's the part I think that matters most. These weren't just meetings. They turned into ongoing referral relationships, real collaborative opportunities on files, and a growing network of professionals who are now actively sending business their way. And I think this is what's important to understand about this. None of this came from paid ads, none of this came from complicated funnels, and none of this came from trying to be everywhere at once. And so I thought it would be timely to create this episode for you that's based entirely on this case study and exactly what we did and implemented for our client behind the scenes to produce these types of results. Because when you look at it from the outside, the strategy was actually quite simple, but very intentional in how it was executed. And how I like to operate is I always believe that the details are what makes a huge difference. And clearly, this is what happened in this particular case. So we focused on 3 key areas. First, we targeted outreach to specific referral partners, and we were very deliberate about who we were connecting with on behalf of our client and why those relationships made sense. So it started with that strategy first. Who are we connecting with? Who are the most important referral partners? Second, we built a consistent presence on LinkedIn, and it wasn't just about posting content, but actively engaging, liking, commenting on posts, and really building visibility in that area. And third, refining positioning so that it was immediately clear how this divorce mediator could collaborate with other professionals and where they fit within the broader divorce and family ecosystem. So yes, the structure was very simple, but please don't be deceived by that, because the consistency and the precision behind it is what made it work, okay? Because this is where I believe most professionals can get it wrong. They seem to think that LinkedIn is just about visibility or posting more, and they think it's all about getting likes or going viral. But what really drives results is actually much more practical, and it's about conversations first and conversations that are intentional. And more often than not, that always begins in the DMs, the direct messaging. It's all about creating conversations that turn into relationships. And what we see is that those relationships can turn into ongoing business. So one of the most critical pieces, I think, in this entire process is exactly what to say and when to reach out. So I'm super excited to share this episode with you. So let's dive right in. Okay, so let's build on what we just talked about because those results didn't happen by accident, as I said, right? We were very intentional. So they came from a very specific way of approaching LinkedIn outreach. And before we get into what to say, we really need to reset how you think about this entirely because most professionals approach LinkedIn outreach as if it was just one single action. And so they'll ask me, well, what's the perfect message that I need to send? And I think that's the wrong question because LinkedIn outreach is not just one message, it's a series of messages. And that distinction is everything because what you're really doing here is not just sending messages, you're reducing risk in the mind of the other person. Okay, I hope that's making sense because people don't respond when something feels unfamiliar to them if the message is unclear or maybe it's too forward too quickly, right? We all have received many of those types of DMs where they are just trying to sell us something and there is no sense of building a relationship and it's all about them. People are very perceptive. They will scan your message, and if there's no value in it for them and it's all about you, guess what? They're just going to move on. They may delete it or they may block you. So I want to look at what actually drove these 80 meetings. And it wasn't one message that just worked, right? It was a process, it was an iteration. And so a series of small intentional touch points that built familiarity, that built trust, and really just made it easier for people to say yes to a conversation. So instead of asking, what should I say? I think it's better to reframe it by saying, what is the process that leads to a relationship? And when you break that down, it becomes very simple. It's what I would call a multi tiered message system. Now, it's simple, but each message has a very specific role. And when those roles get blurred, as they very often can, the entire process falls apart. So let me walk you through this. The very first message is your connection request, right? This is where most people just overthink it or don't think about it at all. They send nothing or they send something generic that gives the other person no reason to accept. So, what I've seen is that sending a message with the first connection is important. And so, when we work with our clients, we will always send a message in the first connection request. Now, there are some that may disapprove of that, but I haven't seen the evidence to suggest that not sending a message actually works. So we continue to send a first connection request message. But when you look at what actually works, it's pretty straightforward, right? You want to be relevant, you want to be specific, and you want to make it easy for the other person to understand why you're reaching out. So here's an example of what you could say. Hi, John. I saw that you specialize in divorce financial planning, which is such an important role in complex cases. I often work with clients navigating similar situations, and I thought it would be great to connect. That's it. That's the first connection request message, or a variation of that. So if you noticed, there was not a pitch, no explanation of the services that the other person offered, and there was no pressure, right? You're simply opening the door. And that's all this first message is meant to do. Now, once they accept, this is where I think many professionals lose the opportunity because they immediately jump into the DMs and they rush it. This is exactly what we didn't do in this case study that I'm sharing with you. Instead, we paused. We didn't dive right back into creating an instant conversation. We engaged first. So we went to this person's posts. We read them, we liked them, we left thoughtful comments, we paid attention to what they were sharing and how they were thinking. And this step matters more than most people realize because by the time your name shows up in their inbox again, you're no longer a stranger. There's already a level of familiarity, and that changes everything about how your message is received. Very subtle, but very powerful way to make a difference when you're using this process. And I think then and only then is when you should be sending your second message, right? And this is where the conversation actually begins. And once again, this is where many professionals go wrong because they make it about themselves. They talk about what they do. They try to move things forward too quickly. They ask for a call. And guess what? That's exactly why they don't get responses. So think about it. When you're reading your DMs, how do you respond when somebody's trying to sell you something or wants to book a meeting with you right away? It's not a good feeling. It's not a way to start a conversation. And I think that's exactly why, when people use this type of process, they don't get good responses or any responses at all. So instead, I think this message should do one thing. And this is what we did. We just start a conversation. It needs to be thoughtful. It should be curious, and it should be focused on the other person. Now, here's an important piece that often gets missed. The goal of that second message, as I said, is not to book a call. It's to start a conversation, because once the conversation starts, and then there's back and forth conversations, and once there is even a small level of rapport, I think that's when it becomes natural to say, hey, would it make sense to continue this conversation over a quick call? And this transition works because it feels like a continuation. It's not a pitch. And for many of our clients, this exact transition is what leads to those consistent weekly meetings. We have so much success with this with our clients. And so it's all about continuing the conversation and not making it into a pitch. I want to share something with you that I see come up time and time again. Many professionals I speak to know exactly who they want to attract, but where things break down isn't clarity, it's actually implementation. So they're not sure how to translate that into messaging, how to stay visible, or how to turn that visibility into actual client inquiries. So if this sounds familiar, I created a step-by-step guide to help you work right through this. This free guide walks you through how to define your ideal clients, identify the right referral partners, understand where they're actually looking, including AI, and most importantly, how to turn all of that into consistent action. You can download your free guide at www.sgandassociates.ca/free-guide. Link is also in the show notes. All right, if you're listening to this and thinking, wow, this makes sense, but I'm not sure how to actually implement this in my own practice. And that's exactly where we support our clients at SG & Associates. So if you're listening to this episode, the 80 meetings, the referral relationships, the consistent flow of meaningful conversations, that really doesn't happen from just knowing what to do. It comes from having a system that's built around your practice, your network, and the way that you want to grow. And that's what we help you design. We work with lawyers, mediators, and other trust-based professionals to build practical, repeatable marketing systems so that you're not guessing what to do next, and you're not relying on inconsistent referrals, and you're not trying to figure this out on your own. And that usually means getting very clear on who you should be connecting with, how to start the right conversations, and how to turn those conversations into meetings. So if you're looking at your own practice and thinking, yes, I want more of those kinds of conversations, I want more consistency, I want a way more predictable way of bringing in work, then I invite you to book a strategy call with me. On the call, we'll look at what you're currently doing, where the gaps are, and what it would take to build a system like this in your own practice. If this is you, then book a call. You can find the link in the show notes. Okay, so now I want to share an example of that second message. Hi, John. Thank you so much for connecting. I really appreciate it. I would genuinely enjoy learning more about your work and what you are currently focused on, especially given your experience in divorce financial planning. I often work with professionals supporting similar clients, so it would be great to hear what you're seeing in your practice as well. Okay, so the second message, notice what's not happening here. There was no ask, there was no pitch, and there was no pressure. Just simply opening a dialogue. And once again, this is exactly how those 80 meetings commenced, right? Not with a sales message, but with a conversation. And this is where everything begins to compound because those conversations didn't start off as one-off exchanges. So once the person responds and that relationship starts building in the DMs, then it's a good time to ask, if it makes sense to take this conversation offline and meet so that you can take the conversation deeper or further. And for many of our clients, this is exactly how they turned into referral relationships. These turned into real collaborations on files. They turned into professionals who now consistently introduce new clients. So when we talk about LinkedIn working, this is what we mean. It's not just visibility and not just engagement, but actual conversations that turn into relationships and relationships that turn into business. And this approach isn't limited to just one exact message. You will have to adapt the messaging. You might have to reference their work. You might reference a post that they shared. You might keep it more conversational. So it's a fluid type of conversation, which means it's not just a one and done, here it is, right? You have to keep the conversation going. So, for example, you may continue the conversation by saying, I saw your post on XYZ topic, and I thought your perspective on this topic was really insightful. Or, I've been reading your content on topic XYZ and really appreciate how you approach, and then you enter in the details of whatever they're saying, right? The structure stays the same in the sense that it's relevant, it's specific, and it's easy to respond to. And this matters because when something is easy to read, it's much easier to respond to. So one of the things that led to the success that we have in booking meetings for our clients, and in particular, this one divorce mediator client of ours where we booked 80 meetings, it was about keeping the conversation fluid. And as we were testing the messaging and we saw that we were getting great responses by going in a particular direction, we would rewrite the script and change it slightly. So we would test and rewrite, depending on how the flow of the messaging is going. And I think that's an important nuance here. You know, it's not just a simple copy this message 1, copy this message 2, and you're going to get the results. It's about starting the conversation. And in any type of marketing, you are always testing and learning. And this is exactly what we do for our clients. And this is how we get them the results that we have been, because we focus in on, how do we improve this? Is this working? How do we get better results? And I think that's absolutely vital to the success of any campaign. And so when our clients engage with us in this process, this is exactly what we do to help them get to where they want to go. So now I want to contrast this with what most people are doing. You'll often see messages like, hi, I help lawyers get more clients through LinkedIn. Would you like to book a call? Right? So that's an example that maybe a marketing expert would send. My question to you is, how would that feel if you saw that? There is no relationship built. I don't know anything about you yet. And we're going straight into an ask for a meeting. So this is what we see in different contexts, of course, depending on your business. And it doesn't make a positive impression. Or you'll see an immediate message that says, let's talk about how we might be able to help each other. But the problem here is you don't even know each other yet. So how can you help each other? The relationship building process didn't begin yet, and you're rushing into something that simply won't work. So essentially, you're trying to move the relationship forward before it's even started. And that's why these types of messages get ignored or blocked. Now, from a practical standpoint, this only works if there's consistency behind it, right? Because none of this was done occasionally. So when we work with our clients, this is something that we do for them consistently. So in this case, we aimed for about 50 connection requests per week. And so that's about roughly 10 connection requests a day. And then once those connections were accepted, we started into the messaging protocol. Okay, so not overwhelming, but very disciplined. And that consistency is what creates momentum. Very, very important, because when you're reaching out in a relevant, thoughtful way, particularly at this volume, you naturally create more conversations. More conversations lead to more relationships, and more relationships lead to more opportunities. Now, I'm not saying that every single LinkedIn connection request that you send or message that you send out is going to develop into this amazing relationship. No, it won't. But the reality is this: it's a numbers game. there's volume involved with this process, right? We know that you need to send so many connection requests and so many messages before you can create that process of engaging and meeting with the right professionals. So the point I'm trying to make here is if you think that you can send out 5 messages or 5 connection requests a week and expect to get results like this, you're going to be disappointed. This is a numbers game. And while you won't be connecting with everyone and you won't be building a relationship with everyone, just know that within these numbers, you're going to find the right people to connect with, to have the right conversations with, and to build those referral partnerships. But it does come down to numbers and volume. And I think when people say, well, are you just spamming people? No, we're not spamming. We're being very deliberate with who we reach out to and very thoughtful in our messaging. See the difference? And so it's super important to do this. And I think there's all kinds of softwares out there that, by the way, LinkedIn bans and does not want you using. And if you use any of these automated softwares, and LinkedIn is very good at figuring out which software is on the platform, they will either close your account or block you for a while. So all of the work that I'm talking to you about is organic and manual. There's nothing automated about this process. Okay. I just want to be clear about that because there are different systems out there. And we've seen how LinkedIn can shut down your account if you're using these automated softwares that spam people. Super important. And I wanted to make sure that I shared that with you as well. So this is manual, organic type of work. So once again, the consistency is what creates that momentum, because when you start reaching out in that, as I mentioned, that relevant, thoughtful way, that's how the conversations continue and grow. So it's all about maintaining a consistent rhythm of the right messages. And that's what builds a real pipeline. So if there's one idea that I want you to take from this episode, it's this. This is not about sending one perfect message, okay? It's about building a sequence, a series of messages. And these messages need to create a couple of things, actually 5 things. Your message needs to A, create connection, B, create engagement, C, create meaningful conversation, D, create visibility, and E, create a relationship that is taken offline in a meeting. Okay, that's the sequence. And this is how business is built today. So here's a quick exercise. I want you to do something very simple. Look at the last direct messages that you sent on LinkedIn and ask yourself honestly, would I respond to this? If the answer is no, there's your opportunity, because this isn't about doing more. It's about doing better, right? Getting those messages to a point where people will want to respond because they feel genuine. The conversation feels genuine. And the message that I think is important to drive home in this episode, in all the years that I've been running SG and Associates, is that the power of social, the power of using LinkedIn to create conversations is important. And we see a lot of professionals posting, engaging, but very rarely do you see them in the DMs creating meaningful conversations. And I think there's an opportunity there to build relationships and build revenue when done well. Unfortunately, the DMs are not really utilized as they should be. And I think, quite frankly, that it is a gold mine sitting and waiting to be had when done properly. So if this is you and you're thinking, I want to do this as well, but I'm not sure, then I encourage you to reach out, book a strategy call with me. You can find the link in the show notes. So I want to bring this back to what actually matters here. Okay, so you've heard in this episode with our divorce mediator client in this particular scenario, the 80 meetings, the referral relationships, the ongoing collaboration, all came from doing a few things well and consistently. So once again, it wasn't more tactics and not more platforms, just a clear process, a clear cadence executed with discipline. So instead of leaving this as an idea, I want you to turn this into action. And here's where I want you to start. First, I want you to define your referral targets or your referral partners and be specific about who you actually want to connect with. So in this particular case, with a divorce mediator, we were reaching out to family law lawyers, therapists, financial professionals, and so many others connected in this space. And so you really need to look at who is your ideal referral partner and where are they in your ecosystem? Because it's not everyone, but the right people. So, secondly, I want you to commit to a weekly outreach rhythm. So, aim for 50 connection requests per week, about 10 per day. Keep it manageable but consistent. Third, fix your connection message. Read it, rewrite it. Make it relevant, specific, and easy to read. No pitch, no pressure, just a clear reason to connect. Fourth, build in engagement before you message again, right? Spend time liking, commenting, understanding how that person shows up. So when you do the outreach, your name is already familiar. Fifth, send your second message with the right intention, not to sell and not to book a call quite yet, but to start a conversation. And finally, you need to track what happens. We are very deliberate with this with our clients. This is how we know our numbers. When we engage in this type of work with our clients, we know exactly how many meetings were set up, with whom, what needs additional attention or follow-up messages, how the meetings went. All of these things are tracked. And so you need to look at, are people responding? Are conversations starting? Are meetings getting booked? And so this is a system. And when you follow it consistently, the results compound. So if you take one thing from this episode, let it be this. This is not an exercise in doing loads and loads of marketing. You just need a better process of fine-tuning your conversations and turning them into relationships, and then those relationships into business. So start the conversations, stay consistent, and let the relationships build from there. Thanks for tuning in today. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes packed with actionable strategies to grow your practice. See you in the next episode.